Now, we've seen the meltdown from the MSNBC Morning Joe team, Joe and Mika. They have embarrassed themselves over and over again. Here is Joe Scarborough on Election Day.
We still have an electorate, 70 million plus, that will be voting for a man who said he was going to assassinate for treason the chairman of the Joint Chiefs because he didn't support him on January the 6th, who has said just in recent days he was going to execute Liz Cheney with a firing squad, 9 guns pointed and shooting at her face. A man who has said that he was going to shut down CBS because he didn't like how they edited an interview. A man who said he was going to be a dictator from day one. A man who said he was going to terminate the Constitution. A man who said he was going to use the Army and he was going to use the National Guard on his political opponents.
Just absolutely hysterical, demented. And it's not just him. The rest of the MSNBC crew have practically declared a fatwa on Trump. They have since 2016. I could literally play you hours of tapes of just Joe. But here's just a teeny tiny taste of the craziness from Scarborough. And of course, it includes Hitler talk. Have a look at what he says before the election and then see if you can detect the change of tone after the election. And funnily, he's wearing the same outfit in both clips.
An autocrat who decides to be a dictator on day one, who decides to arrest all those who he doesn't like, who's talked about assassinating generals that aren't sufficiently loyal to him, has complained to his chief of staff that his generals should be more like Hitler's generals. Seems to make sense for leaders of both parties to seek common ground, if it's possible at all. And I will tell you, a lot of Democratic leaders we've talked to this past week, since the election, have told Mika and me it's time for a new approach.
Just completely bonkers. Joining me now is Newsweek's senior editor-at-large and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, what do you make of that? Such a dramatic change in a very short period of time. And Joe and Mika have gone and had a meeting with Donald Trump. But my first question is, why would Donald Trump spare any of his valuable time meeting these two?
Well, look, Rita, Donald Trump loves the media. I mean, he has a love-hate relationship with the media, to be clear. He hates some of the at the same time. But, you know, I mean, at one point in the past, he referred to Maggie Haberman of the New York Times as his therapist because he just enjoys talking to her on the phone. I mean, he's had a love-hate relationship with the media for literally like 35, 40 years. I mean, probably since before I was born, going back to the old tabloid days of the 70s, 80s. I mean, Donald Trump cares what the media says. I mean, to be clear, the media usually says horrific things about him, but he cannot resist the temptation to care what they say. So that probably psychologically is what is going on here. Having said that, I think he has much more important things to do. We have a country to save. We have an economy to get back on track. We have a border to secure. We have multiple global hotspots in Ukraine and the Middle East and China to really start to cool down. So I would personally not advise him to meet with people like Joe and Mika. They certainly don't deserve his time, for God's sake, given what they have said about him. We just saw a small snippet there. The Hitler talk has been out of freaking control over there on MSDNC. So I would not have advised Donald Trump to meet with them. But you know what? Look, he's the leader of the free world. If he wants to meet with them, so be it.
I just can't understand it. They have shown themselves to be so deliberately dishonest, dangerous with some of the deliberate lies they've spread, really divisive, ugly lies. And now they've kind of given an opportunity to redeem themselves. I want to ask you about some more media shenanigans. This is lawyer Maya Weil defaming Trump's defense secretary pick Pete Hegseth. She seems to think his Christian tattoos are somehow white supremacist symbols and also making other false claims. Have a listen.
Let's remember, like when we're talking about the secretary here and Hegseth and his white supremacist and extremist tattoos on his body, he is also a person, if he is in this job, who will be having the discussion with Donald Trump about sending the military into communities to police U.S. citizens.
It's not the first time Pete Hegseth has been defamed in recent days. I know he has a lot on his plate right now, but Josh, you're a lawyer. I think he needs to seek some legal action. You can't just go on television and spew these sort of deliberate lies. This is something that's very easy to check. To call someone a white supremacist should come with some consequences unless you're actually telling the truth.
So first of all, let me just observe that in the clip we just saw, I cannot help but notice that Bill Kristol is actually on the right side there nodding along as this woman is saying these horrific things about Pete Hegseth. I mean, how far has Bill Kristol fallen? Back when he was one of the leading conservative thinkers, someone who was all in for a strong Pentagon, for a strong military. Now he's nodding along that Pete Hegseth is a white supremacist. Look, Pete Hegseth is a Christian. He has some Christian tattoos. By the way, as an observant Jew, Pete Hegseth also has a Hebrew letter tattoo, like literally on his arm there. He is all in for the U.S.-Israel relationship. He's all in for Western civilization. That is a very bad white supremacist,
isn't it? What sort of a Nazi has a Hebrew tattoo on his body?
I mean, these jokes write themselves, right? I mean, Pete Hegseth is a very sharp man. I mean, even on the leftist elitist own credential scale, and they care a lot if you go through the proper gatekeeping institutions, if you've been trained and vetted. I mean, he has degrees from Princeton and Harvard. So even on their own terms, he is qualified. More generally speaking there, I mean, he served in Iraq and Afghanistan, multiple Bronze Stars. He is completely qualified. I actually had a piece for the Daily Mail, the British publication, just last week, saying that I think the pick is pure genius. America, actually, the Pentagon has seen a double-digit decline in recruitment for the Army, Navy, and Air Force alike. We need a young person from the millennial or Gen X generation to go in there and inspire morale in America's young warriors. We need our young soldiers here in America to stop reading Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo and to start picking up the books from George Patton and Douglas MacArthur. And frankly, I think Pete Hegseth is a perfect guy to do that. I'm all in for this pick. I would love to see him start filing some defamation lawsuits. However, as a lawyer, I have to say, America's defamation law system is totally fakakta, we might say back in the old Yiddish language. It is really bad. It has to be reformed. So I don't like his legal chances, but he probably deserves his day in court, honestly.
Well, let's have a look at why they are so scared of Pete Hegseth. You gave us some good reasons there. Yes, he's a 20-year veteran. He's won 2 Bronze Stars. As you mentioned, he's Ivy League educated. And most importantly, he calls out the BS. He's got common sense. He's been there. Yep. He was on the Sean Ryan show a few weeks back, and he explained some of the lunacy that is weakening the military.
We're now allowing people who used to be men or women join, and then after that we pay for medical or physical transitions to another gender, which by definition makes them non-deployable and non-trainable for because they're, and the same thing with asthma medication or inhalers. Like when you're in basic training, you can't have an inhaler when you're doing your exercises because you can't count on having an inhaler in a combat situation. Well, if you're medically dependent on drugs to maintain your gender or a particular balance of chemicals inside your body, you're by definition non-deployable. And so they'd have soldiers who can't train, can't deploy, have been on the books, and yet everyone has to be careful about what pronoun you use with them.
Josh, non-deployable soldiers and obsessions with pronouns. You can see why recruitment is having an issue. You can see why morale may be down. What sort of generals have been allowed to rise through the ranks? How long has this rot been there? Obviously, it's not something that's just happened in the last 4 years.
Well, first of all, I mean, how do you not love Pete Hegseth? Just like watching that clip right there. I mean, he's a real person. I mean, he's not someone who has climbed his way up through the Pentagon bureaucracy. He is not someone there who is wearing his ostentatious uniform with those symbols. He's wearing there with his tattoos like a normal person having a real conversation about real issues there. Again, I think if the Pentagon is smart and they want people to actually sign up and join the armed forces at a time, by the way, that China has never been more powerful, Iran on the march, Putin on the march, it is so important that we get young men and women, but especially young men across the American heartland, to be inspired to serve their country again. And it is just, it's crucial that someone who actually has served in America's post 9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, I think, have the ability to relate to young prospective recruits. But that actually is the answer to your question as well, Rita. I think this train really started to go off the rails in the aftermath of the 9/11 era, when America really started engaging a lot of these feckless, moralistic boondoggles, whether it was the Gaddafi intervention in Libya. We have seen the various ways that Iraq and Afghanistan have not exactly panned out here. Look, when you start getting a holier than thou attitude that America exists not to secure its own national interests, but to spread some Western Lockean Jeffersonian conception of individual liberty. When you start to think that you are so holier than thou, that the American military is there to spread democracy, I mean, when you start to go there, you're going to have people that are going to say a lot of crazy things that are subservient to that somewhat crazy thing as well. So I think one thing naturally kind of just flows from the other, unfortunately. I blame a lot of it in the post 9/11 military mentality here in the States.
Now, former CIA Director John Brennan has criticised Donald Trump's pick for National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard. Have a listen.
So many of her substantive comments, as well as previous actions, have called into question whether or not she has a good understanding of global politics and the U.S. role there. But also, she doesn't have any experience in intelligence. She has never served in the intelligence community.
Josh, he also warned in that interview, get this, that Tulsi will not be apolitical. The pure chutzpah of this guy is something to behold. Should the likes of him be worried? Because the role he has played, I would call it straight out election interference over and over again, whether he was saying that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation or the Russian collusion hoax, or his part in really politicizing and weaponizing these institutions.
Yeah, John Brennan and Jim Clapper. I mean, those are the two foremost left-wing spies here in the United States who have been more responsible than anyone in our entire nation for politicizing and weaponizing and sicking the intelligence community agencies as partisan apparatuses to subjugate their political enemies. It is disgusting. And for this man to sit there, John Brennan, and to have the chutzpah to say that Tulsi Gabbard does not have the relevant qualifications because she didn't serve in a certain spy agency that was headed up by John Brennan or Jim Clapper or one of these other 51 deep state spooks who affixed their signature to the Hunter Biden laptop story there. Are you out of your mind? It is interviews like this. John Brennan's saying that deadpan, straight face into the camera. It is interviews just like that has caused the American people to lose complete trust in the intelligence community. Once upon a time, conservatives here in the States were the de facto allies of the CIA, of the NSA. Sean Hannity on Fox News used to wear a CIA lapel pin. Conservatives used to reflexively defend them, but it is shenanigans like this that have caused all of us to lose total faith there. Tulsi Gabbard is nothing if not an outsider. Hey, look, Donald Trump ran on a drain the swamp platform. You shouldn't have voted for him if you didn't want him to put in outsiders like Pete Hegseth, like RFK, like Tulsi Gabbard to drain the swamp. So far, it looks like Donald Trump is going to do that which he campaigned to do. I say that's a great thing personally.
Now, Josh, we have seen a cultural shift just in the past couple of weeks. Massive cultural shift. Yes, we can see it in the UFC. It's always kind of been evident there. That's been a conservative base. But you're now seeing it in football, where we're talking about college football, even the NFL. And even country singer Aaron Lewis had this to say on stage.
God bless Donald J. Trump and J.D. Vance, and God bless America!
And we've seen pro-Trump trends such as this one go viral.
Young man, there's no need to feel down. I said, young man, pick yourself off the ground. I said, young man, cause you're in a new town. There's no need to be unhappy. Young man, there's a place you can go. I said, young man, when you're short on your dough, you can stay there. And I'm sure you will find many ways to have a good time. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. They have everything for young men to enjoy. You can hang out with all the boys. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay at the YMCA.
Josh, things have changed. The cool kids are MAGA now.
Yeah, that's quite a reel. And Rita, I couldn't help but notice your excellent dance moves as well. I think Mar-a-Lago would be well served to have you perform there in Palm Beach, Florida, perhaps one day. I guess we'll see. But it really is funny how the generations shift. I mean, back in the day in the 1960s, Republicans were the stodgy old generation. They were closely affiliated with the Vietnam War, and then you had the Democrats who were seen as the cool campus kids who were protesting the war. I mean, you saw in this election, Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump in the age 35 and under demographic by 1 point. 1 point. That was the bread and butter above all of the Barack Obama 2008 coalition. Donald Trump is a marketing genius. He is a global icon. And things like this are naturally downstream of the fact when you have a two-term president of the United States who has actually already been a global, universally recognized name for 30, 40 years prior to it. I think it's great. I love it. Hopefully it only continues, God willing, Isa.
Josh Hammer, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Rita.